Hi everyone, welcome to a poker vlog with a bit of a difference. Poker with kids.
Fuck it, let's go. Don't tease me. Let's play some fucking cards.
Hi everybody, welcome to Poker with Kids and Wife. This is episode number 18. Got a few things for you this time. Going to start with some interesting APL news that might be of interest to some viewers, as well as the unthinkable that happened a little while ago. I actually played 2 sessions of poker in the same day. So we'll have a look at both of those where we get to it in a minute. But let's get started with the APL news that we got going. Okay, so APL news. This is coming from the staff Christmas party that was held a few weeks back. Couple of issues on that. First of all is one thing that was had a bit of a debate amongst the TDs was about the idea of standardising the games that we have all around Melbourne, around the state, at least in Victoria anyway. And the idea of whether standardisation is a good or a bad thing. I think the general consensus was to make things easier, standardisation is a good thing, but by the same token, you also don't want to just say, look, I'm playing exactly the same event all the time. So things like the clocks and the levels, that's pretty much standard across the board at 12 minutes. There's a few events where they might have 15 minutes for the pre-first break time, but for the most part, 12 minutes is standard pretty much across the board. But other things like starting stacks, chip up cards, bonus chips, formats, Terminator bounty, all that sort of stuff that they have across the statewide, across all the games, and the different buy-in amounts. I think it's good to have some variation, but feel free to drop some comments about what you think if you're an APL player. Do you like the idea of standardising the formats? Or do you prefer a bit of variety? Would you rather have your Wednesday game, obviously it's still going to be Hold'em, but would you rather have the Wednesday game the same as your Friday game as your Sunday game? Or would you rather play a slightly different format on each of the days that you might play during the week? One other thing that was mentioned in regards to that is in terms of filling in as a TD. Often it's actually difficult with all these different formats to figure out what specific format you're needing to use for any session you might be covering for someone else that might not be able to make a session. So something that I think would be a good idea, not only for TDs running events, but just for the players turning up, is to make it clear exactly what the format is for each of the events. Yes, obviously there's all the bits about the $2 going to cover the major events and state championships and all that sort of stuff, but it would be useful if at the very least on the website there was things like, okay, this is the starting stack, this is any special things, whether there's a chip up card, whether there's bonus chips, whether there's like a Terminator format or eliminate, freeze out or whatever format we've got, but just put that in a place where it's accessible not only for the TDs but also for the players as well. I think that'd make things better for everyone. The other interesting thing to come out of the meeting was the plans for major events in 2019. Obviously at the start of the year, the big event that APL is focusing on is the APL Million at the start in March. And at least as far as 2018 is concerned, major events has pretty much been left to the various sort of state, regional championships, best of the best and that sort of thing. With obviously the big focus being the APL Million in March of the following year. Looks like things are going to change up a little bit with 2019, and we only sort of got a really brief outline sketch of what's going to happen, but they're actually looking at putting together what you could almost call a bit of a major events tour run by APL. So they're looking at every 4 to 6 weeks roughly having some sort of major event somewhere around the country, most likely up the East Coast, Pretty much with a lot of these events having either high 5-figure guarantees or 6-figure guarantees on the prize pool. So a really good event that's not obviously the APL million size, where it's a $1,500 buy-in, will be something less than that. But it also be an event that you don't necessarily have to win an event or play lots to qualify for. So something else to add to playing poker for APL, rather than just playing your weekly event and the occasional monthly state championships or quarterly best of the best type of thing. So major events coming. I know at the very least there's plans for an event in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, as well as a few other places, other major cities around, like I said, around the East Coast. Don't know too many other details apart from that, but as I said, they're looking at every 4 to 6 weeks after the APL million in March of 2019. Also, I think the APL million will be back again in 2020. That's pretty much become a standard format now over the last few years, running it at the Star. So I suspect that's going to be back in 2020. But again, let me know what you think of this national tour. Do you think that's a good thing for APL and pub poker players? Give them another event. Again, it would be sort of higher buy-ins, but again, we've got bigger prize pools. So, and you might even be able to travel, have a weekend away in maybe interstate or another city in your state, and play a bigger event. So let me know what you think of those in the comments below. Now for a bit of poker content. So this first part, in terms of poker content side of things, comes from the staff Christmas party run by the Full House Group, APL, their big umbrella group, which essentially all the TDs that turn up play a free roll. The boss put up a $1,000 prize pool, obviously a free roll. So yeah, some people take it seriously, some people don't. So it's a bit of a hit and miss as to who you've got on the table and how everybody else plays as to how the game itself is going to play out. I didn't get the camera out until a little bit into the game, but early on, couple of interesting hands. Had the old 3 in a row and managed to eliminate one player. So I a lot of limping in these events, just generally as a pub poker thing. It's not much different with TDs playing. So it was one of those hands where a couple of limps in front of me, raising late position with ace king, take down the blinds and limps. Next hand, same thing, couple of limps again. I put in a raise, take it down pre-flop with pocket queens. Third time again, a couple of limps again. I raised it up again. This time I got ace 10 suited, and this time one of the limpers decides that they're going to take a stand because, 3 hands in a row, I can't have it all the time. And they shoved their stack in. I decided to call it off, even though ace 10's probably obviously the weakest of those 3 hands, but probably the bottom part of the range where I'm calling off. But he decided to take a stand with Jack 9 offsuit. Interesting hand to decide to take a stand, but the ace 10 held up. So yeah, it was good to pick up some tips early. A little bit later on, I got the camera out, and I'll just run through some of the old hole card footage, because that's what some people like to see. Obviously, being a just TD game in the Full House office, no problem with using cameras to capture hole cards. It's a little bit different for places like the casino, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So essentially the only hand I really want to talk through is actually my bust-out hand from the tournament. They'd just broken one of the tables. They started with, I think it was 26 or 25 players across 3 tables, and I'd had a decent stack, but when they broke one of the other tables, the big stack from that table came to our table. At this point, I think the blinds were 3,000, 6,000. We started with a 25 and 25, so effectively a 50k stack. At this point in time, I think I had around about 100,000, but the big stack that came over had at least 400,000. And without knowing any information, the assumption is, based on what you can kind of hear from the other table, that things were a bit wild, things were a bit loose. Everyone was sort of playing a few hands, and obviously the guy who had the big stack had obviously picked up a few hands in one of a few pots to chip up so much. So in this hand, he actually raised under the gun to, I believe it was about 20,000. I looked down at Queen Jack suited, decided to call from, I think, the small blind, and the flop came down Queen 10, I think it was Queen 10 3, or Queen 10 low card, at least rainbow. So top pair, reasonable kicker against a guy who seems like he's splashing about, even though I don't really have any information. It's the first hand he's played at the table. Seems like he's splashing about a bit. I check it to him, he puts in a bet, I decide to shove, he pretty much snap calls, and he rolls over pocket kings. The turn gives me a little bit of hope with a 9, so I now have an up and down straight draw to go with my top pair, but a brick on the river. I think it was a 5 or a 6 on the river, and we're done. So no good in the staff free roll, so might have to try that one again next time there's a staff event on sometime down the track. Okay, so after busting out of the staff free roll, I had a bit of time to kill before I had to head home, so decided to head to Crown, play a little bit of 1-2 at the casino.
The next stop is Casino at Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. Stop 120.
And during the session, basically had four big hands that were, I suppose, stack changing, significant, however you want to call it. Essentially, the first hand I'm going to start with, we had a under the gun raise to 11. Player in the middle position raised it up to 25. I'm in small blind and look down at pocket queens. Obviously, just a standard raise. Pocket queens are generally going to be ahead of that, but especially at the lower limits, I find that 3 betting really isn't that common. Generally, it's either a big pair or a big ace, often a suited ace like an ace king or an ace queen. So in hindsight, maybe flatting might have been better, but really, when you're playing with what's essentially a 50 big blind start stack, the max buyin's 100. I think at this stage I had about 80 in my stack. I think there's not a lot of choice here, so I shoved for my 80. The original raiser, who was the shortest stack out of the three of us, he called, and the player in middle position who had us both covered also called, and I was not in good shape at all. The initial the short stack guy had ace jack suited, and the big stack who had me covered had pocket kings, and the board ran out ace 10 10 5 ace, so the short stack tripled up, the big stack got the rest of my chips, and I was off to rebite. Second hand from the session at Crown Casino. This time I was in the big blind. We had 3 or 4 lips in front of me, and I looked down at kick 2 suited. I was happy to check my option, go to see a flop, and the flop was 5-2-2. So flop trip 2s, a rainbow flop, so no flush draw out there as yet. And with everybody limping in, I figure that my trip 2s is going to be well in front, especially with the king kicker. So I let out on a flop with $10. Got called by the player on the button. The turn brought an ace, which again I think is probably a pretty good card for me if he's decided to float with an ace for whatever reason. If he has a 5, he's probably not going to change too much. He probably thinks, okay, now he's got 5s and 2s, and the ace will chop with another 5. So ace is a pretty good card for me on the turn. So again, I decided to bet 15, and again he calls. And the river was a 3, putting out 4 cards to the straight. Also actually completed a flush draw. So I think there was, I think there were 3 clubs on the board. I had king, 2 of spades. But again, I don't think we can really give the guy credit for either straight or flush. So I bet 20 on the river. Based on what he actually had, a bit of surprise he actually took so long. He had a bit of a think and eventually called. Maybe he's scared of the flush. I don't know why he'd be scared of the flush, particularly with the ace coming on the turn and me betting from the start. So seems unlikely that I've had the flush. And seeing as he's tanked and called, I've confidently rolled over my king 2, thinking that trip 2 is going to be good. And he's rolled over 4-5 offsuit for top pair that's gone runner straight. So again, no good in that hand. So haven't started off the best in the two big hands we played so far, 0 for 2, but thankfully that changed a little bit later. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, the third big hand from the session at Crown. This time had an early position raise to 11, had a couple of callers, and I was in the big blind, looked down at ace queen suited. Got a couple of possibilities here. Obviously, calling and raising are both definitely in there. I decided I just don't like sort of playing these kind of hands in the big blind out of position, so I decided to flat the raise rather than putting in 3-bet, although 3-bet is obviously perfectly fine as well. The sort of flop was queen high, checked the pre-flop raise a bet, everybody else folded and I called. Blank on the turn, got checked through. Given that he checked the turn, again another low card on the river, so I decided to lead the river. He decided to call, and top ace queen was good, so good to take that one down. Got a little bit back from earlier, but not quite back to where we were. But always good to win one of the bigger pots in a session. Final big hand of the session at Crown. This time the under the gun +1 raises up to $11. This is actually the guy who had the ace jack in the earlier hand. Got called by the button. I'm in the big blind, looked down at queen jack of clubs and decided to call. We saw a flop of ace 10 8, so pretty good flop for me, as far as one that doesn't actually hit my hand. So we've actually got a double gutter. Obviously the king and the 9 make us the straight, and it's actually going to be the nut straight, which is always a good thing that it's a draw to the nuts. So the pre-flop raiser continues on the flop, bets 15, and the button calls. Obviously I call as well. And the turn is the perfect card for me. It's an offsuit 9. Gives me the straight to the queen, obviously the nuts at the moment. And to make things better, the under the gun +1 player decides to keep betting. He bets $20. The button player, in even more good news, decides to raise it up to 45. Here I think I could call the 45, but again we're playing fairly short stack wise. I think I had about 110 total, and I know I covered the under the gun +1 player, and the guy on the button had me only slightly covered. So I think I just call the 45. Obviously that lets the pre-flop raiser in, and even though I might still have the best hand by the river, obviously there's really only a few river cards I'm worried about. There was actually a flush draw on the turn, so obviously I don't want the flush card to come in, but there's not a lot of cards that I'm really scared of, although having said that I don't really want the board to pair. So I really think the easiest thing, I think if my opponents have got any kind of hand here, they're going to run with it. So decided to shove the turn for 110, and again in more good news, got called in both spots. End up with a blank on the river, and obviously the nut straight's good. So good to finish up with winning big hand almost a triple up. So that was the final big session, a big hand for the session. Overall, in for 200, out for 225. Not exactly retirement money, but good to have a small winning session rather than a losing session. And again, good to get out and have a session at Crown. So thanks to the wife for giving me the afternoon off. That's going to wrap up vlog number 18. Hopefully we'll be back before the new year, hopefully even before Christmas and that. If not, happy New Year, happy holidays, all that sort of stuff to the viewers. Hopefully I'll get at least one more video out before the end of the year, but if not, see you again next time anyway. Thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, and feel free to subscribe to the channel or drop a comment, especially about those APL things I was talking about before. Okay? Thanks. Bye.